Welcome to the Resiliency of the Human Spirit podcast, where we share all about human triumphs for the collective's healing and empowerment. I am your host, Priscilla Hanley, and my guest today is Debbie Gail Zane. Debbie is a certified life and relationship coach and author of Finding Peace and Purpose Amidst the Tears. Debbie always knew she wanted to contribute to other people's lives in a meaningful way. Little did she know that tragedy could hold a gift that would reveal her highest purpose. After losing her beloved 26-year-old son Alex to mental illness and addiction, Debbie transformed her life by turning her pain into her purpose of helping other parents of teens and adults struggling with mental illness and or addiction. Through finding her calling, she was able to find healing for herself. Without further ado, I'm going to bring Debbie on right now. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, Priscilla. So nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning. And so before we continue, I just want to say that I read your book and it is a beautifully written book. I really felt your pain and Alex's pain. And more importantly, what I felt was the profound unconditional love you have for Alex. It is so profound, Debbie, that it goes beyond words. I can't really put it into words. And I really admire your strength in pushing through your challenges to begin your healing journey. So I just want to congratulate you on your book, and it is a beautiful piece of work. And I would love it if you could share your story with our audience today.
Thank you so much. And that really warms my heart that the love for my son came through when you were reading it.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So profound.
So my story, I will start back to the day that I knew that something was different. And really, it was a life-changing day. And that was when Alex was 17 years old. It was the day after Thanksgiving in the US. And he came to me that Friday evening and told me that he had thoughts of killing himself and that he even described exactly how he planned to do it. And he admitted that he had even attempted suicide a few times as well. And as a mom, that was really, really difficult for me to hear. And but I knew that he came to me because he trusted me and that he, had something to say. So even though inside I felt like screaming, I stayed calm so that I could listen and hear what he was saying. And we were able to, fortunately, we had a really good doctor that was on call that whole weekend, and she called us back and she made arrangements with the hospital to speak with him of the psychiatric unit. And they called us, they had a lengthy conversation with him, and they had me bring him in the morning. And that was the beginning of really a huge change in our lives. He was there for 3.5 weeks and diagnosed with something called schizoaffective disorder, which at the time I had not heard of. And not long after that, he started using drugs and alcohol as I think, a coping mechanism, really. He was given medications, but that was an ongoing battle. We were told in the hospital that getting the right medications for his symptoms and not having so many side effects for him could take years. And it actually did take a couple of years. There was a lot of work to find the right treatment for him, the right therapist for him, the right psychiatrist for him, the right medications, and a lot of pushback on his part, especially as he turned 18 and didn't like the meds, didn't like how they made him feel. And that wasn't the first hospitalization. I mean, that was the first, but that wasn't the last. There were so many. And I think the following year, there were 3 or 4 in the same year. And then the year after that, the drugs got really bad. And it was 3 times within 6 months that he was admitted to a drug and alcohol treatment center. And that was really tough. He basically had tried almost every drug. And in fact, one of the treatment centers, he came out of there having started using heroin. There was some of the people, and they left the treatment center and they drove somewhere and they bought heroin. And so, even the treatment centers weren't always a safe space. It just depended, you know, what the people there want of their lives. And I think he really struggled so much. He had a number of other health issues, such as type 2 diabetes and a seizure disorder, which I think just didn't help all that he was dealing with the drug and alcohol addiction and the mental illness. I almost lost him several times over the years of drug overdose. And it was really scary. There were those phone calls in the middle of the night from the ICU, and there was times that them telling me they don't know if he's going to make it. And it was really scary. And the first few years I spent living in fear. I spent not sleeping very well, just kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop, like not knowing when I was going to get that call in the middle of the night, or what was going to happen, or the next person was going to bring him home unconscious and lead to another near death. And it was really hard. And I did manage to start to really turn things around for myself. And not, it wasn't to say that I didn't go through further crises with him. I did, but I was able to find more peace in my life, and actually to start to live my life, because I realized I wasn't really living my life. My life was his life. My days revolved around how he felt, how he thought, what was going on, whether he was using, whether he wasn't. Like, that was my whole day. That was my whole existence. And so I realized that. And when I realized that, I was really able to work on turning that around and finding peace for myself and finding a life for myself. And as a result, I really think that this helped me to have a closer bond with him. We were already really close. We always were. But there were certainly challenges with his illness and addiction. And I really think being able to take care of myself and have more peace, I was able to be a better support for him, a better mom for him, just a better place to deal with the challenges and to have a stronger relationship with him. And, I know in the later years, he was more living, well, for many years, he was living in different living situations. And so I didn't see him all the time. But I was able to focus on whatever was happening in my life. I was able to live a life. And when my other son and my daughter and I and Alex would all get together, we were all very close. We were able to just love him and accept him no matter where he was in his journey. And we had to accept that he may not want the same things as we do. And he may want sobriety, but he just may not be able to get there. It may not be strong enough. And it depended. He was up and down. He was in and out of treatment. And there were times he had sobriety, but it didn't always last. And in the last few years of his life, he was more serious about trying to stop the drugs and alcohol. And he put himself in treatment and in the hospital a number of times. And there were times where we really had a lot of hope. And we held on to that hope. No matter what he was doing, we just held that space for him. And I guess our last time together was, we all got together New Year's Day. By this time he was 26 years old, and he loved family. We were always so close. He loved get-togethers. All his life he lived for family. And so we had to get together at my place, and on New Year's Day, and this was January 1st, 2022. And we had a really lovely visit. This was the first time my other two kids and I can remember seeing him completely sober and seeming happier. And we really came away from that with a lot of hope, like feeling like, he's really feeling better. He's really looking better. He really seems to be doing better. And um, we left that visit with all giving hugs and exchanging I love yous, and not knowing that that was going to be the last time. And it was January, so it was cold, and there was a big snowstorm on that Monday. And um where I was living out in the country, we had a lot of snow and no power, no heat for the week. And my other two kids and I came down with COVID, and Alex was looking for a new place to live. And I had spoken to him on the phone Tuesday night because he found a place he liked. He sounded excited and hopeful. He thought once the snow was melted, he could move in. And then I realized the next day, Wednesday, that I did not hear from him. He had been temporarily staying at a hotel in town near where he had been living until he found a new place. I was paying for it on a day-by-day basis because we thought it would just be a few days, and he liked to walk everywhere because he didn't have a car. And so it was in town where he could still get around. And I didn't hear from him, but I didn't realize until later in the day, probably because I was sick and I was freezing without power and heat. And I realized later in the day, and I tried to reach him, and I could not reach him. And so I called my other two kids, and have you guys heard from Alex? Nobody had. And my daughter and I started calling around. I called the hospital. I called the hotel. He was not at the hospital. The hotel told me he checked out, which I just kind of I was like, how? Where did he go? And of course, they didn't have that information. And my daughter called the jail, nothing, no sign of him. We continued to try to reach out. And it was the next morning, Thursday morning at 9 a.m., that I received a phone call from a police officer who said he was sorry to do this over the phone, but with the snow and everything, and me living so far out in the country, that he couldn't travel out there. He said that my son was found dead that morning in his hotel room, and that they were ordering an autopsy and they didn't have that information yet. And I I felt like my heart stopped. As a parent, that's the call that you just don't want to get. And I think when you're dealing with a child with mental illness and addiction, this is probably part of the fear that you have in the back of your mind, is that call. And it actually came at a time where I was feeling a lot more hopeful for him. And so it was really hard. And in the, in the days and weeks after that, it was really not easy. And the funeral was really tough. And I was so thankful to have such a close bond with my other two kids, because we were each other's rocks during the funeral and the viewing. And gosh, for the next while, I did almost everything from my bed. I wrote the bulk of my book even from my bed. It was only about in the early, I would say in the very early days, very early weeks, maybe not days, I started reading memoirs that other people who had lost a child wrote. And that gave me a really, really good sense of connection, because nobody else in my life had lost a child. And that was something that I could just do from my bed, is to read those and to just have that connection. And that became sort of the meaning of my days in the early days. And then about a month after he passed, I was guided to open an email from Hay House about a book writing workshop. And at the time, I didn't think I was really ready to absorb learning information. And but something made me sign up anyway, and I listened to it. And by the end of the workshop, which was 4 nights, I signed up for their year membership, and I knew that I was supposed to write a book to help other parents who had a child with mental illness and addiction, because it's not easy. And so many times we spend our lives living in fear and not living our lives. And many times I see that the relationships break down, and I wanted other parents to be able to have that really strong relationship. Like, that's one thing, is I could, I had all these beautiful memories with my son that I could cherish, and I didn't have regrets like, oh, I wish we were closer, and we were really close. And of course I wish he didn't have the illness and the addiction, but I could at least, have those beautiful memories. And I wanted other parents to have that as well. So so it became my life purpose, like, to help other parents, to start coaching parents, and to write this book. And I wrote the book in about 6 months, mostly from my bed. I started a Facebook group for parents to help parents as well. And it just really became my mission to help others on a similar journey. And so that's a lot of my story, I guess, in a nutshell. I know you've got some questions for me, so we can go there if you want.
Yes. Thank you, Debbie, for sharing your profound story. And I'm so sorry for your pain. You know, when you're talking, I still can feel your pain. And I just want to send my love out to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with my questions now. So you talked about schizoaffective disorder, and I'm not really familiar with schizoaffective disorder. I have heard of schizophrenia. So what is the difference between schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder?
Yeah, so Um, there's a lot of overlap. Schizoaffective disorder is a cross between schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. There are, and people's symptoms can vary, but generally, the diagnosis means that the person has symptoms that belong to both. So, for example, my son had the paranoia and the hallucinations that would usually be common with schizophrenia, but he also had the highs and lows, the depression and the
Mhm.
mania that can happen. So the mood disorder part of things with bipolar. Now, he suffered more from the depression than the mania, but it could be either at either time. So at the time, I had never heard of it either. And there weren't a lot of people diagnosed with it back then. And it was really hard to find, a therapist and a psychiatrist that had worked with patients with those things. And now I'm finding that it's such a more common diagnosis.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay, thank you for the explanation. And what about, in your book, you talked about that beautiful spiritual experience that you had on the night of Alex's funeral. And I was wondering whether you could share that because I think it would give a lot of parents hope, parents who have lost children, to give them hope that their children, even though they have passed, but their children are still around them. So,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I will share that too. And then one little an additional small one that was in the weeks before the funeral. But so the one on the night of the funeral, and it also happened the next night as well, is I was in my room and I was in my bed, and my dog was in with me, and she was doing strange things. She was like scratching on the door and scratching on the door, and I thought, oh, maybe she wants to go out, but it was kind of late at night, so I took her out, and I did this a few different times, and finally I thought, okay, she can't possibly keep needing to go out every few minutes. And then she started to kind of go in circles. She just started like running in circles. It was so strange. And I realized at that point, I felt my son's presence. So it
mm,
was him. And so he loved to play with my dog. My dog's name is Belle, and he would play with her and he'd get her all riled up. And she'd run in circles like that because he'd take a toy of hers and kind of do this with it.
Oh.
And she's an older dog, but he's always done this her whole life. And so he would just love to play with her like that and get her riled up. So he was there, and I couldn't see him or hear him, but it was like this extra sense, like this
Mm.
sense that we're not usually used to using, that I could just, this energy, I could feel his presence, and I knew it was him. And so I started talking out loud to him, and I just started talking, and I didn't get any response then. I wasn't really sure. I didn't understand how you could receive responses from somebody on the other side, but I just started talking to him, but feeling his presence, it was so strong. And I think it was the next night it happened again, and I was on the telephone with my other son, and Bell started doing the same thing, and I told him about it, and he knew right away that it was Alex there with me, and it felt so special, and you know so so wonderful to feel that, but also hard.
Mm.
um and a related experience was I guess in the week and a half before the funeral, I kept hearing this voice keep playing in my head, "Hey mom, it's Alex. Hey mom, it's Alex." It was something he always said to me, from my book.
Yes.
He would sometimes be in these emergency situations where he didn't have his phone. He'd end up at the hospital. He'd call me from the hospital phone, or his phone would break. He'd call me from a friend's phone. He'd say, "Hey mom, it's Alex," as if I
Mm.
might not recognize his voice because it's a different phone. And so I kept hearing, "Hey mom, it's Alex." And I didn't know why I was hearing it. And eventually I figured out he was trying to tell me, just like all those other times he'd call me, he was trying to tell me he was okay. So that was
Oh.
what he would do when he was calling those other times. And so this is what he was trying to do. And as soon as I figured out he was trying to tell me he was okay, it stopped and I didn't hear it.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was really sad because I had become accustomed to hearing that, and it stopped. So, and it wasn't like an out loud thing. It was more like it was coming from him into, like, kind of like a thought
Mm-hmm.
transference process.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was really sad when it stopped.
Oh, yeah, that's validation.
Yeah.
He was coming through to let you know that he was okay. That's so special.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your book, the writing of your book. And you feel that Alex was there with you too when you were writing your book, right? Can you share this with our audience?
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. He totally helped me with everything, with all the thoughts, all the memories, everything that was supposed to be in that book. The early days, the early weeks, the early months, I didn't sleep well. And so when I was working on this book, all those sleepless nights, all of the thoughts and memories and details, all the details for the experiences I was supposed to share in the book, they would all come pouring to me overnight, every night. And I would have to jot down things and make notes every night. It would come to me so much. And I remember in the Hay House membership, them saying we need to have an outline before we start writing. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, there's just so much information. How am I going to organize it in the outline? The next night, the whole outline came to me, and I wrote
Oh,
the
wow.
outline the next day in one day. And that was him. That was him sharing all the things that were supposed to go in that book. I mean, they were all things I was there and I experienced, but as other parents may know, you don't always remember all the details of everything for, all these different things. And so the things that I needed to remember, they all came to me within enough, which with as much detail as I needed to feel like I was there again, going through the experience so that I could take the reader through the experience
Yeah.
as well. And I know that that was him from the other side, because my memory is not the greatest myself on my own when I'm trying to recall things. And I mean, he helps so much. And even just being able to do that outline so quickly when normally I'm a person that loves to organize things, but sometimes it will take me a while, not just a day or a night.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's been by my side the whole time, with writing the book and even marketing the book. I remember I was driving to a book signing at a Barnes and Noble, and it was about an hour away. So I was in the car and I was talking to him out loud, and which I do a lot. I talk to him out loud, and I said, Alex, please bring anybody who's supposed to, locally, who is supposed to read my book, who needs my book, please bring them into the bookstore. And sitting there at that table for the day, doing the book signing, I met so many people that said that they didn't even know why. One woman was passing through. She didn't even live in the area. She had no idea what made her stop and go
Oh,
into the
wow.
bookstore.
Oh,
But she
wow.
said she needed my book, and she proceeded to tell me about her situation. And I had other people very similar like that as well that day. So I think he helps me. He helps me with, getting it out into the world.
Yeah, wow. That's so amazing. And we talked before, and you said that you went to a medium, right, to try and connect with Alex. And how did that go for you?
Yeah, so that was amazing. I've actually had a couple of sessions with her, and then more recently my two kids did a session with her, which was wonderful. So it was so great because she came highly recommended, and she was able to really, well, first of all, she could validate so many things. She knew so many things about my son that nobody could have known. They weren't they weren't out there anywhere. They weren't in my book. I mean, there were things in my book, yeah, but there were things that weren't in my book. There were things that I don't think you could find out otherwise. And so I knew that it was my son coming through. Um, and the first time that I met with her, it was wonderful, but it was also extremely emotional for me. It was about maybe 6 months after he died, which is still a bit early to see a medium. And I was really emotional afterwards, and it was really hard. I felt like I was got a little bit set back with some of the painful emotions that I was feeling.
Hmm.
But the other times that I met with her, I didn't feel that way at all. It felt more of a connection, which it still felt a connection the first time too, but it really felt like a connection. And you know, he he told me how much he did love me and how much he appreciated how much I did for him. And he was sorry for what he put me through, and which of course wasn't his fault. I mean, he didn't ask for having a mental illness. He didn't ask for dealing with addiction. I mean, I felt so bad for him to have such a difficult life. And um, I also knew that he was really close with my grandmother who had passed away when he was a teenager. And he was actually like with my grandmother in the earlier, like maybe the first year after he passed, he was with her a lot, which was wonderful because they were really close. And he was able to just say a number of things, and that were comforting and validating, and also about my kids. And then one thing that was so amazing so when my kids were gonna meet with the medium, and I arranged it for them because I wanted them to have that experience too, and because they were extremely close with Alex, in the couple of days before the appointment with the medium, I would talk to Alex, and when I did, I would say, make sure you come through when David and Stephanie are going to be seeing her. Make sure you come through, because what I'm told is that the medium can't control which
Hmm.
of your loved ones are coming through. So anybody that you've lost can come through. And I wanted to make sure that Alex did for them, because I wanted them to have the same experience that I did. And so I said that to Alex a few different times. And when my kids had a phone call with me that night after they had the appointment, they said to me, Mom, the medium said that Alex said that I had said that he should make sure to come through for them. And they're like, did you say that to Alex? And I said, yes. And they were just blown away. They were like, oh my gosh, because that's what the medium said Alex was saying. And I mean, they had no doubt that it was Alex coming
Yeah.
through, because nobody else in the world knew except for me and Alex. I mean, I didn't tell anybody that this is what I was saying to Alex, and I live alone, so nobody heard me talking out loud except my dog and Alex. Um, so it was just, and my kids, it was their first experience, so it was very emotional, but they said, and my daughter was in tears, but it was somewhat happy tears afterwards.
Mm.
And they both said that since then, it's transformed their relationship with him. Like they speak to him more, and I think they have more that belief that he's hearing them.
Oh yeah, this is validation that he's around, right?
He,
I
he
mean,
is
he knew your
he's around.
conversation. Yeah.
He is
Wow.
around. He's around a lot. He's around really anytime I need him to be. I mean, every time I drive to his gravesite and bring
Mhm.
flowers, I always ask him, what color flowers do you want? So I always ask. And sometimes, there's been times where he said ones where I'm like not sure I'll find them. Like one time he said blue, and I'm like, okay, blue flowers. And I walked, as soon as I walked into the store, like the first flowers I saw was blue. I'm like, okay, these are the ones I'm
Oh,
supposed to get.
wow.
So he's always there. He really is. He's really there. So I think for anybody who has lost a child, seeing a medium can be, and you can do it virtually nowadays. I've done all mine
Mm.
over Zoom,
Hmm.
and it really can be very, very helpful in the grieving process.
Yeah, I agree. Seeing a medium. I recently lost my dog and I went to see a medium because I was grieving losing my dog. And yeah, I wanted to know whether he was okay. And the medium brought through my guides, although it didn't bring through my dog, but it brought through my guides. And they said that he's doing fine, not to worry, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I know mediumship can play a really important role in the healing process. So apart from mediumship, right, what are the other resources that you turn to for your healing journey?
Yeah, so for my healing journey, it's been different things kind of along the way, really. I mean, honestly, in the first year, writing my book played a huge role, because
Mm.
even if you're not going to write a book, like just writing can be so helpful in grief. So because it can take what's going through your emotions in your mind and in your thoughts and everything, and getting them out and putting
Mhm.
them on paper. And so even if it's just for you, sometimes just writing through your grief can be so helpful. And for me, it was a big connection with my son, because with my book, he was helping me. So it gave me a lot of connection. So that was a huge piece for me. Like I mentioned in the early days, reading memoirs that other parents who had lost a child, and just having that connection that early on. I had tried a grief group, and it didn't feel like the right fit for me at the time, but getting that connection through the comfort of my own home, my own bed, while reading the book, that was actually what I needed. And everybody's
Mm.
everybody's different in what they need. And also, keeping your loved ones' memory alive. So like doing, like for me, starting that Facebook group to help parents, pivoting my coaching practice to work with parents, you know, speaking and sharing my story, these kinds of things, I realized after doing a lot of soul searching, became what is my real purpose. And that purpose is also honoring my son. And
Mm.
I know this is what he would have wanted, is to help others. And so it's like, I feel like as I'm doing these things, it keeps me closer to him. So it helps a lot in the grieving process, because it helps when you're kind of honoring that memory of your loved one. And I feel like also the love for your child is a big part of the process, because, well, I mean, we grieve because we love, right? If we didn't love, we wouldn't have all this grief. but keeping that, realizing that the love for a child never dies, and keeping that love alive, and doing things that are meaningful. For instance, like, sometimes I will write a letter to my son. I talk to him out loud every single night, sometimes more than at night before
Mhm.
bed, but at least minimum every night. Sometimes I will do like certain things that I know that, he really liked, or when I will think about like a memory of him, and maybe drive by where a favorite place of his that he loved, and um, of course, keeping those pictures around the house, but just like really staying connected to that love that we have, because even though the physical body isn't here, keeping that love alive really helps a lot. And I have recently, in the beginning of December, joined a grief group, and this one feels like the right fit for me and the right timing for me. But everybody is really different with that journey, and what helps them. Um, and it does help me hearing other people's experiences. And I think sometimes when you're really early on and you're hearing other people share about their loss, sometimes it can be hard because you get into their grief as well. So then you're experiencing your own grief,
Right,
and you're not in a place to be able to take that on. And
right.
so kind of able to have that distinction between what's yours, and having that compassion for the other person, but not having to take on their grief as well. And you know, so when you can kind of do that, a grief group can be really helpful as well in the process.
So when you were talking about the grief group that you're part of now, is it part of al-anon or
No,
is it
it's
okay, it's something
yeah,
else?
Al-Anon was something different. That is for parents that have um a child or any loved one. It could be a spouse, a parent, child. Al-Anon is a support group for people who have a loved one with mental illness. I'm sorry, not mental illness, alcohol or drugs. So it
Right.
would be addiction support group. Um, and that was a big part of my journey when Alex was living, a huge part of my journey.
Okay, understood. Okay. So we talked about the difficulties in Alex's living arrangements, right?
Yeah.
I know at one point he stayed at the Oxford House. Can you tell us more about the services of the Oxford House and how they help people?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was first recommended to our family after he had had that year where he was 3 times in a really short period of time in and out of treatment rehab centers. And his counselor said to me before he was going to be able to get to come home is that he said, every time he comes home after these treatment centers, he relapses. And he was 19 years old at the time. And he said, you really should have him go into an Oxford house. And this was completely new to me. I didn't know much about it at all. And what it is it's a sober living home. And so it's for anybody that has a alcohol or drug problem who wants to get sober. And so to live there, you do have to be sober. So if you relapse, you do get kicked out. So that
Mm,
is a concern. So there is a little bit of stress involved as a parent,
right.
but it can be a wonderful asset because basically, so my son's was, I believe it was about 8 guys living in the home. Usually they're between maybe 6 to 10 people, depending how big the home is. And each person kind of has a separate room, and they come together, they share the common areas, and they have like weekly meetings, and they basically support each other through their sobriety. So you have these people who are living with you in the home who are going through these same challenges with
Mm,
staying off drugs and alcohol, which can be really hard, because um you can go to meetings, which the Oxford houses do have requirements. So you have to go to a certain amount of meetings per month. And these meetings would be either Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. you have to get like, you have a sheet and you get them signed when you go to
Right.
you have to present them to the home.
Okay.
And you also have to get a job. So at the time when he got admitted there, or started at the Oxford House, he didn't have a job, but one of the guys there was working at a Safeway and was able to get my son a job there, which my son's kept that job for 5 years, which was great for him to have that stability.
Yeah.
And and it got my son to start going to meetings regularly because you had to get them signed. And, when you're going to meetings, the thing is you're not living with these people. If you're not living in an Oxford house and you're just living at home, or you're just, renting a room somewhere, you're not living with the people who are going through the same thing. So it can be
Mhm.
really helpful to have these people surrounding you, that are going through something similar. And he made some good friends there. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to stay there a long term. He eventually did get kicked out. He became suicidal at one point and took too much of his insulin and tried to kill himself, and then changed his
Mm.
mind and called me to bring him to the hospital. And he didn't have to say anything to the people in the home, but he was somebody who shared a lot with other people that he trusted. So he shared about his suicide attempt, and he ended up getting kicked out of the home. So
Okay.
it can be hard. It can be really great. There are lots of people that live in these homes for many, many years and don't get kicked out, but they're not equipped to deal with mental illness. So that's the only thing. So
Mm.
if it depends how predominant somebody's symptoms are. So if the symptoms are mostly you're really having trouble with your drug and alcohol addiction, and you want that support with staying sober, and maybe you do deal with depression or anxiety or something like that, you're dealing with something else too, because usually they go hand in hand, the mental illness and
Mhm.
addiction. But maybe it's not as prominent. But with my son, his mental illness was pretty severe. So I think it was just harder, and he wasn't able to stay a really long time. But like I said, many people do, and it can be
Right.
a great solution to look into.
So do they have like counselors or a specific counselor or mentor living with them, or is it just they're by themselves?
They don't. Unfortunately, it's
Okay.
not that kind of a situation where there is a counselor or a mentor. There's somebody who's maybe kind of the leader of the group home. So,
Okay.
but they're just another person like everybody else. They don't have like a counseling type of experience, but maybe they've been sober living for a lot longer, so they have that kind of experience. It's kind of like the people who are in AA or NA are told to get a sponsor, and usually that sponsor is somebody who's had more sobriety than themselves, and they don't have any type of special counseling training, but just the fact their life skill and they're further along can be helpful. And so that's kind of where the power in these homes come from.
Right.
There's usually people that are further along in their journey than you are, and so they just have that, bigger life skill.
Right. Okay, understand. I like to move now into your coaching practice. You mentioned that you have a coaching practice. Can you share more about the services and programs you provide to the collective?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I work with parents who have a teen or adult child with mental illness and or addiction. And I help them in many ways, mostly through one-on-one coaching. Every once in a while, I run a group program, but I have actually found the one-on-one lately to be what most people coming to me have
Mm.
really needed to work on their individual situation. And I meet them where they are basically. And so things that we've worked on have been, that living in fear, that not being able to live their lives, that the fear consuming them, and, not sleeping well and just worrying about when the next shoe is going to drop, when they're going to get that next call that, something has happened. And that need, what I find is that the people living in fear have this really strong need for certainty in their lives, and certainty meaning certainty that things are going to go how they as parents want things to go. And so
Mhm.
we just don't have certainty like that when it comes to other people that are not ourselves. Whether it's a child with mental illness or addiction, or whether it's just another child that doesn't have that, we don't have that certainty with other people. And when we really hang on to that certainty and put it front and center as our priority, it really impacts the fear that we feel and the lack of peace and the lack of living our lives that we can have. And so we work on that piece. We work on kind of, bringing a certainty in our lives in other ways to meet that need, and kind of replacing that strong need for certainty with other things. And the other things I help them with are their relationships with their child. Many times when parents come to me, the relationship has completely broken down. And I see this happen a lot because what happens is, over time, the communications become about their illness or about their addiction. And it it becomes difficult. The parents cling on to wanting certainty, wanting their child to do it their way, and it really just sets up this divide between them. And it pushes them further and further apart. And so I work with them on, you know, learning how to build that relationship, learning how to handle the communications, how to set boundaries with love so that they can trust themselves. I remember there was one mother that was really afraid to take the calls from her daughter because her daughter was, her daughter was, I think, around 30 years old, and her daughter was homeless, and her daughter was actively using drugs. And she loved her daughter and she wanted to be there for her daughter, but she didn't want to support the drug habit and she didn't want to enable her. And she didn't feel strong in her boundaries. And when her child would call, she would wear her down and demand money. And the mom would always give in. Um, and we worked on setting boundaries. And so we worked on things that she could do so that she could start taking the calls from her daughter, so that she could start meeting her daughter in a neutral place, and, for instance, bringing a picnic and really starting to build up that relationship. So we kind of look at, like, you know the history and, like, why the relationship might have broken down, and how and what things can we do. And this is why it's unique kind of to the individual.
Mhm.
It lends itself better to one-on-one coaching. The
Right.
other thing that we've worked on too is that many times the parents, we don't realize the need to grieve the loss, even though their child is still living. It's still a loss, because once mental illness and addiction happen, the things are not the same. Lives are not the same. The relationship isn't the same. Our child isn't the same. Our experiences aren't the same. Our hopes and dreams are different. We may have had this hope when they were younger that they were going to, like, grow up, go to college, get married, have a child, get a job, all these things. And we see other people around us doing it, and not our child. And so we work on grieving that loss, because it's really important to get to a place of acceptance, that we actually kind of become aware that there's a need to grieve this loss. And so, like I said, just I kind of meet the parents where they are, and we go from there.
Yeah, that's so profound because when we think about loss, we usually think about somebody who has transitioned, right? We
Yeah.
don't think about the loss of the change in dynamics in the relationship between a parent and a child. Yeah, that's a really good point. I understand you have a special gift for our audience. Would you like to talk more about that?
So anybody listening to this podcast at any time, I'm offering a 20% discount on my coaching services. Um, this is good. This is good anytime. And because I want to help more people. I want more people to be able to still lead a good life, to still be able to have peace in their life, to still be able to have a close, loving relationship with your child. And so I want to be accessible to more people. So if you are hearing this podcast and you reach out to me, you can contact me through social media or through my book website or my coaching website, which I think Priscilla will provide.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes, and I'll put the discount code in the show notes as well.
Yeah, so just like I said, reach out, let me know that you were listening, and I will give you that discount. So
Wonderful. Thank you for your kindness in offering the discount to our audience.
yeah, absolutely.
And so now we have like 5 minutes left. So I have a signature closing question for all my guests. And so I'll ask you it now. It is, what is your closing message for humanity to help in our collective healing and empowerment?
Oh gosh, what a beautiful question.
Oh, thank you.
My closing message is that we never know how long we have in life, how long anyone has, we or anyone else. And these moments that we do have are precious, and to live them, to be present with our loved ones, to let our loved ones know how much we love them, and to not, don't hang on to the arguments, don't hang on to the disagreements, don't hang on to these things that are blocking that beautiful unconditional love, and just really allowing that love to flow. And yeah, just knowing that life is precious, and these moments are precious.
Oh, thank you. I so resonate with that. So thank you, Debbie, for spending the last 1 hour with us. And I am so grateful that you decided to share your story with our audience. It's such a profound journey, and I hope to have you back on in the near future.
Thank you so much for having me as a guest. I've really enjoyed it.
For everybody who's watching or listening, thank you for your time. Until next time, bye for now.